Alrighty, so I did a little more playing with the board game design that I was working on, mainly just figuring out that if we do what I was talking about last night, where we look at this little one, if you look at this map here of the 5x5 grid, you get in the corner here, if you set it up here, start here, work your way up, the bottom right is blue. This next one is starting on this corner, which is the equivalent of this corner. So rotate it this way. The bottom right would be blue. And you can do that as you rotate all the way around. The blue line or the blue connector in the middle is the one that they would all be in the middle if you did the circle track all the way around 4 tiles. So with that knowledge, we could feasibly say that with a 2x2 grid, that the bottom right corner being blue on one of them could be set up to be the blue lines being the ones that you don't usually track. I'm getting a little lag on my video here, but by the same token, if we did a 6 or a 3x2, we end up with a little bit more of an issue. Like you can still do a looped track where you could do a snake, 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 and you can't have blue be, well, you might be able to get away with 2 of them being blue. But doing a 3x2 causes additional problems in the yeah, I mean, would it be? No, it can't be. Like you can't really do a 2 on the same side being blue when one goes this way, and then have the next one go this way and have 2 on that side be blue, with them being the same tile reoriented. You can't really do that. So I don't think it works as well for a 3x2. But for the making a 2x2 loop track, it certainly works. If you were to do the 3x2, you're just going to have to, do the optional rule that the connector on the bottoms is, or the connector on the outside is viable, and the connectors on the middle are not, or some such thing. But while I did that last night, there's an additional thing that's sort of been taking my time today. And that is the recommendation of whether or not board games could be played with an internet feature. And that recommendation, like I said last night, tends to be more of a video game designs element. And so I kind of set it offside and said, like, that's not what I'm working on right now. It's more of a video game style of game, and sort of thought I was leaving it there. But once the idea is introduced into my brain, I can't leave it alone. So my brain just kept playing with it all night long. And one of the things I looked up is, I talked about my friend. He had this robot toy when he was a kid. that he lets his kid play with now, or used to let his kid play with. And I found it. I found it online. It's called Tiger Electronics 2XL. And it had two versions of it. The previous one was not by Tiger Electronics, I don't think. Mego Corporation version was this was a toy that ingeniously hacked how the things it used worked in order to do something that hadn't really been done before. It was one of the first interactive toys. So basically, like the first one was, let's see how they describe it here. The original version created by Mego Corporation was made of brown plastic with a white plastic found in the interior face of the robot. Yada, yada, yada. It had two red light bulbs for eyes. These bulbs also flashed at moments while 8-track cartridge tape programs played. It had 4 red buttons on its stomach with designated options for answers to questions asked by the toy, such as question, A or yes or true, B or more information, and C or no or false. A knob also found on the lower right portion of the toy, which controlled its volume and power. The mouth was reused detail molding taken from Micronauts Battle Cruiser. Okay, that's not useful information. At the bottom of this large, so it's an 8-track cartridge tape. And the way they used to use these is, it's a regular 8-track player, but by utilizing unique and clever patented mathematical decision tree programming methods, over 20 interactive modes of operation were achieved. It seemed to most people like a computer which had enough information and interactive questions to entertain and educate a child or adult up to 2 hours. Subjects included sports quizzes, Guinness books, so on and so forth. That doesn't really explain as much on that one as the Tiger Electronics, which uses the micro cassette tapes, which, it's some great lighting there. The micro cassette tape, what you've got is on one side of the tape, you have basically the tape running through the middle has 4 channels. A left and right speaker for both sides of the tape. If you put one tape in and you have 4 buttons on the front that shut basically one channel off, other channel off, so it's only ever playing one channel at a time. So on side A, it's either playing left channel, left speaker, right speaker through a mono speaker. So you're either getting left speaker, right speaker, or on the back side of the tape would be a recording done backwards, so that when you did left speaker, right speaker for the back side of the tape, it would play the message the right way around because it's backwards in the holder. And so you had 4 channels of information that you could tap into with certain buttons. And so 2 of those buttons would be left speaker, right speaker, side A. The other one would be left speaker, right speaker, side B, playing backwards. And so the message on the back side of it had to be backwards to do that. And I think that's absolutely freaking brilliant. And I love every ounce of that. That is brilliant use of the four channels on an audio cassette tape. Now, with that information, I went down a rabbit hole. I went completely down a rabbit hole with this last night and started contemplating I can't get 4 channels of audio to play with. but I could do a YouTube video with a true or false quiz to it. So you have both channels of audio, left and right speaker going, and you plug in a set of earbuds or something like that, and both channels are asking the question, and then you make the choice which earbud to listen to for the answer. One's going to give you the, if you say, like, is 2 + 2 4? If you say that is false, you hold up the right earbud, and you listen. And it'll tell you you're wrong. But in the left one, if you chose that one, it'll tell you you're right. It is true. So I really started to sit down and think oh, I could do some very interesting interactive videos with this. And I got to thinking, could I make, I could potentially market an assembly that you could plug a set of earbuds into, or even if I really wanted to, I could wire together some electronics equipment that would take 2 speakers and have both left and right channels running into each speaker, but have a button in the front that would turn both of them into left channel or right channel speakers at the same time. And assemble a little kit that does that. I could also build something that you could make out of cardboard that you could put an earbud in and slide the left earbud out of a funnel, a ear horn, an acoustic horn that would increase the sound enough to be audible as a desktop unit. So you just put 2 earbuds in, and you just slide back and forth, and it moves a little megaphone in front of the earphone that is the one you're selecting for your answer. And I kind of love this idea. I don't know that I would do a lot with it on this channel. I might. It's hard. The trick with this is it's not really great for something like a choose your own adventure. I'd have to look at ways to do that, but the trick is a choose your own adventure story. It's multi-branching. It's not, you don't start with point 1 and make choice 1 or 2, and once you're on choice 1 or 2, the choice from choice 2 goes to choice 6 and 7. The choice from choice 1 goes to 3 and 4. And so, that would require minimum of 4 channels eventually. And that only gets you 2 tiers of choices in. So you'd get intro to story, choice made, more story, choice made, more story for each of those. It gets you part of a story. So unless it's a very short story, it doesn't get you very far. With 2 channels, like the left and right audio channel for a YouTube video, you can get true or false things. You can get option 1 or option 2 things, but after you've made the option 1 or 2 choice, you don't get to split either of those choices again. You can reunite those choices, and it's harder to make that work for a choose your own adventure style story, because it's you've made a choice, you get 2 different directions that result from that choice. You come to a fork in the road. Do you go left or do you go right? And if you say I go left, I tell you a little bit more of the story about what happens when you go left. but your options after that are to remain in the left channel or reunite on a center channel again. It's basically like, well, I mean, you don't have to reunite on the center channel, but you can stay on the left channel, or you can stay on the right channel, or you can switch to the other channel again. So if you made a choice to go left, it doesn't make sense that further down the line, the next part of the story where you make a choice takes you to where you would be if you stayed on the right side of the story. It would take very, very tricky story writing to do something where choice 1 splits you and choice 2 on either of those could swap you or keep you going on the same track. It would be a really tricky thing to write a story where that is what happens. So it would be best suited for true or false or one or the other options, and then end it. So the area I'm thinking this might be more useful for is, I was looking at, like, over on my other channel, I have the partner channel that I want to work on for that eventually, Steaming Mad. And one of the things I thought would be interesting to potentially do with that is a series of, like, steaming in that case stands for science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And if you're going to do content for each of those categories, I think it would be fun, say, for like the science category, to do a science experiment and stop before whatever the experiment does happens. Show the lead up, show the preparation, show the initiation, and then stop it and say, like, what'll happen, A or B? And then choose your choice and see if you were right, and then have an explanation as to why or why not that choice was the right choice. And then you can go back and do another experiment on the same video. So you might do 2 or 3 videos on the same, 2 or 3 experiments on the same video around a topic, and do an experiment for each of them with a, true or false, or option 1 or option 2 multiple choice experiment. That would be a lot of fun. You could do that for technology. You could do that for engineering. You might be able to do something like that for art. That gets a little trickier. And the trick to that is, if you did a video with those techniques, the video should remain the same. It's the narration that changes. And that's the other limit on how this works. Like, telling a story where making option 1 or option 2 the choice you make, you have to use the same artwork no matter which choice a person makes. So it's not super great for those multiple choice story paths. It's good for true or false questions about what's coming next. So, like, one of the things I was trying to contemplate with this idea was a possibility of using it as a storytelling tool. And one of the ways I thought about doing that was like Clue, where as you go through it, I give you little tips and clues about what happened in the crime, enough information to lead you to maybe having enough to puzzle out who the killer is, but make it enough of like a puzzle, like a riddle, something you have to figure out. Is it choice A or is it choice B? And when you come to the end, you have to catch the killer or something like that. And that option of, did you get it wrong and the villain gets away kind of situation, or the classic villain's dilemma or the hero's dilemma, stop the villain or save the hostage. What's the right choice in that situation? The trick to that is there's no right answer on those. So that's not as easy to work with. But setting up scenarios like those where it's two choices and the choice you make has consequences to how the story ends for you, that could be a fun little experiment to try to do with like, I'm thinking right now, like you could do it with like moral stories, like could you sacrifice one person to save another? Which one would you choose? Would you stop a crime if you knew that the person being victimized was themselves a monster? Could you launch a nuclear weapon against another country that did nothing wrong if in the end it secured peace for generations afterwards? Which choice would you make? And when you make that choice, finish the story with details about the consequences and the outcomes of those choices. Like, those could be some very interesting stories. They're not a full choose your own adventure story because you get one pivotal point in the story where your decision makes a difference in the outcome. And there are only two outcomes in the story. So I think those would be interesting experiments to do with the medium. Again, sort of like I was talking last night, these are video game more than board game elements. And they are gimmicky. I don't think any of these kinds of things is necessarily ever going to be a classic thing that people remember. And could I figure a way to include something like that in a board game? Maybe. Maybe I could do something like you're playing a board game and there is sort of a NPC kind of player that's telling a story. And you come to a point in the middle of the story where, as you're playing and interacting, you make a choice. And that choice decides how interactions with that virtual player occur from that point on. So you might come to a point where you have to side with a character in the gameplay or the virtual player. And if you choose to oppose the virtual player, then channel 1 is a virtual player as your enemy. And channel 2 is that virtual player as your friend, and the story covers how the other person is now a threat you have to address. or somebody who was hurt by that choice. And so you could essentially do something like that in a game. It gives you 2 chances to play the game. You get 2 games out of that game. From that point on, anytime you ever play it again, the game is going to be the same as a previous gameplay. Or at least the story is going to be the same. Now, if the story element is flavor that you add to motion across a board, it's possible that you could make that a little bit more playable. But again, it's very gimmicky. And it's a fun and interesting idea, but it's an idea that could be executed more interestingly with more options and more playability, just making a complete video game where you can have 27, 137 different options of outcome and gameplay options. So it is still very gimmicky. Now, I mean, and it's still very much a hybrid board game, computer game idea. I really don't know if there's a way to incorporate useful video elements into a game and have it be playable multiple times. Yeah, it's very complicated to make that work right. I think with the approach I was using for my other Choose Your Own Adventure videos was the annotations that you use it like the Choose Your Own Adventure books. So you click this link to go to this point, you click this link to go to this point, and that works. You can kind of build something like that in playlists on YouTube, but I hate that design because you're stacking tens of videos together. And what I would really rather do, and I was playing with this a little bit last night too, was when I was first thinking about this robot and how it worked, my thought was potentially that what you get is a track that's playing and it gives you a question, and then you hit a button that either jumps you forward 5 seconds for the answer or 10 seconds for the answer. So you're going to get 5-second answers, yes or no, true or false, right or wrong. And you can do that kind of thing a few times. YouTube videos have a couple of buttons that you can use, hotkeys that you can use. If you're watching a YouTube video and you press the L button, it'll jump you ahead 5 seconds. If you press the right button, the right arrow button on your keyboard, it'll jump you ahead 10 seconds. If you push the back arrow, it takes you back 10 seconds. If you push the J button, it takes you back 5 seconds. And the K button pauses the video. So these are all potentially useful shortcut keys and things you could throw into a interactive video that you could use as a game. But it still leaves you with the limit of you have the option of going forward 5 seconds and 10 seconds, and that's kind of it. So it's still limited to true or false, option A, option B kinds of games. Now, could you combine that with the channel left and channel right audio? Maybe. But the tricky part of that is you might be able to get that to work for a bit, but the the L button and the right arrow button get you 5-second returns on what you're doing. And immediately after those 5-second turns, you have to hit another button to jump to a different part of the video. Because if you jump ahead 5 seconds to the first response, well, actually, you could get 3 out of that. You could get the hit no button, hit 5-second button, hit 10-second button. So you could get 3 responses off of that. But each one of those 3 responses is going to be 5 seconds long, and then the next one will play in the sequence. So if you do that, you have to have it be like a 3-second response. Hit the pause button and make your choice of where to go to next. So in the case of a 10-second, in the case of, yeah, it makes it really difficult. In the case of do nothing button, you have, say, like a 10-minute story element. Choose option A, B, or C. If you do option A, hit no button. If you do option B, hit the L button. If you do option C, hit the right arrow button. Now, if you do option A, I have about 3 to 4 seconds to tell you something, and then make you push the pause button at least, and then you hit you'd have to hit the right arrow to go to the next part of the story, to skip 10 seconds over the next 5-second intervals. Option B would play option B, and then at the end of that, hit the pause button, make your choice as to the consequence of that. Or no choice to be made there. You have to hit the 5-second button to jump to the next story element. And then the last one is hit nothing, go to the next story element. And the next story element will be common for all 3 in that way. If you did option B, jumping 10 seconds forward, you could perpetuate section B further, but at the cost of the do nothing option A for round 2. I'm not sure that makes as much sense verbally as it does when I'm thinking about it. So basically, story element part 1, do nothing, go to part A. When you're done with part A, you have to go 10 seconds forward to the next option. If you don't do anything, you get what you would get if you did choice B. So you have to go 10 seconds forward to story element 2. And if you choose option B, it jumps you 5 seconds past the do nothing option, but 5 seconds before story element 2. And so with that, if you made the choice at the end of that one, instead of to go forward 5 seconds to story element 2, you could do jump 10 seconds and start at story element 2's open spot right afterwards. But that means story element 2 only has 2 choices in it if you were to ever go back through there. So it becomes a pretty tangled mess to keep track of where you are on that one. Because once you've done story element 2 open spot without hitting a button, your only option at the end of that one is to go to story element 3 with a 10-second button. You don't have any other options on that one. Now, could you do a stack of story pieces like that, where story element 1, option B, leads on a train of story pieces? You can at least get 2 more 5-second chunks. So you can get 15 seconds total train on that at least. You might even be able to perpetuate that further. But it depends on how much of that perpetuation interferes with the ability of options B and C, or A and C to perpetuate past certain points. And maybe those can be like the choose your own adventure stories when I was younger had a fair number of dead ends, like you've died pieces that happened in those stories. And so it's possible to throw a few of those in there to kill off a chain that can't go further. I'd be curious to write that algorithm out to see what makes the most sense for doing that. But that's something I've been brainstorming over the last 24 hours. And I've got to work on some things tonight for a kid's birthday tomorrow. So I don't have a lot of time to play around with a lot of this right now. So I think I'm going to call that a night. And I will catch up with you tomorrow, I guess. So thanks for the prompts. Thanks for the weird ideas to play with. I will catch you later. Take care and have a good night. Is that public?